Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by my co host from California, Glenn Highcove. Man, are you excited about this week's show? Some new developments in the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, right?
Yeah, definitely. We kind of teased it a bit last week, where we said we've been doing, gosh, where this is going to be the 120th episode of the show, and we've covered a lot of material. Um, and we do this because it's fun, right? Like this is an enjoyable thing for us. It doesn't really make us any substantial amount of money or anything like that, and that's not why we did it. Um, but yeah, as we kind of move forward, sometimes one of the things that's kind of frustrating for us is we only when we only cover one topic an episode and dedicate a long look at it. Well, on one hand, we do completely flesh it out, but sometimes we get this big backlog of things that we'd love to look at or just have a brief conversation about. And sometimes we do, like we have conversations, you and I, you're us, we have conversations offline all the time about something, but like other people don't get to hear it, and sometimes it's like almost the most interesting side conversations, or almost exceed what we talk about on the show because all these other things come into it. Well, anyway, this is a long-winded way of saying that, especially with the holidays coming and just different pressures going on in work and life, and um, we thought let's take this opportunity to do a different structured show here and there, um, and when we feel like it, really, and go into the holidays with kind of an open approach to how we do some of these other topics that maybe aren't even ready for, like, a 90-minute episode.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good that you mentioned the fact that we are dealing with a lot of like work and life stuff. On my end, definitely more so than usually. So I might be slightly weaker in terms of my knowledge on various cases that we might describe. But I promise you guys, we have some really interesting stuff planned this week. Like one of the cases, like I just looked at it, I was like, what is this? So I think we have like a jam-packed show. We are very excited to find out what you guys think about our new format, and if you guys enjoy the way we talk and the way the show moves and progresses and different topics that we cover. And yeah, given the fact that the holidays are coming, we wanted to switch it up a little bit. It's the episode 120. I kind of personally had a feeling that it would be better value proposition for our audience if we would bring multiple stories, multiple breaking stories, and talk about like what's actually happening right now. We would be also jumping back to like older developments, maybe some case from way back is now breaking. We would want to cover that. We want to be like a news source for you guys for all of your true crime mysteries news. And every week you could tune in on a Wednesday and hear us talk about all of the latest developments. And as I've said, guys, it will take a few episodes for us to really get the hang of this. So this is our first shot at it. Now, as Glenn briefly mentioned, we are at least for me personally, November looks like it's gonna be a very difficult month in terms of like everything that's happening in my life, like new developments, new updates. But we do have a set of cases that we want to talk about today that we've prepared, and I think the first one that we curated, well, mostly Glenn, because he definitely did all the heavy lifting this week. I really didn't even chip in at all, but this one case that Glenn has curated for us to discuss on this week's episode, the first one would be, I'm just gonna read the news article's headline. It's a 9-year-old has been dead inside a Houston apartment for a year. Three other kids were abandoned. And, from what I've gathered, all of them were living in the same apartment, right, Glenn? Because we will play a short news clip here, but Do you have like some more, like a brief overview of this whole situation?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of the short version. And this is a story that really got a lot of attention in the U.S. because it's just so outrageously, disturbing. Um, and I guess a miscarriage, or not just justice, but maybe the social services and care that society owed these kids. It seems like a lot of people failed here. But yeah, I mean, it's basically you have these what was it, three children, at least living in this house. Though I think this woman had something like six children or something like that, or four to six children. Can't remember what the number was, um, from different people presumably. So yeah, she has this boyfriend, and he's terribly abusive and violent. And I guess this is all allegedly, since nothing's been prosecuted right yet. Nothing's gone to trial, but allegedly this boyfriend was just tremendously abusive to all the children, but especially the 9-year old, and I guess had systematically beat him to death uh, at one point. Um, and then from there, it was just unimaginable. I can't even imagine what the people living next to them must have thought. But then it turns out this is probably like these are probably people living on the fringes of society,
Yeah.
if you really look at it closely, because of the kind of neglect that was going on with the children. And nobody's reporting this. I don't even know if they're going to school. I don't think they were. Um, and like the neighbors are like sneaking them food, and like no, I don't even think
What?
anyone's collecting rent. Well, that's here's the crazy thing. At one point, weeks before this whole thing comes to light, to the rest of us, the mother and the boyfriend move out, but then they kept coming back to the apartment every few days to like beat the crap out of the kids that were still alive. Um,
Jeez.
and they're not even like providing. I mean, it's just like it's a nightmare. I mean, it's weird that it's back to back with the episode we did last week, which I would also say is pretty nightmarish. I mean, it's really hard to find anything more extreme than almost what we covered last time. But this is the kind of, I think I mentioned this in other shows. Child abuse just makes me crazy. So when you hear stuff like this, you just, how can kids who grew up like this ever be normal again, right? They've been
Yeah.
irreparably damaged.
That's an interesting point, because one of the other cases that we still have planned for everyone is also gonna like raise the same questions, right? So I'm just gonna play the news clip that I have on this case, and then let's flesh it out a little bit more after we hear what the news people have to say about it. So I'm just gonna play it right now for everyone. So let's just listen in, guys.
Tom, this breaking news coming to light just moments ago. We're learning that 15-year-old boy called the Harris County Sheriff's Office saying that his 9-year-old brother had been dead for a year now, living in the room next to his. This is the apartment complex where it all happened. Really just shocking details here. He told deputies that his parents haven't lived in that apartment in several months. Earlier today, the sheriff's office came here to City Park 2 at West Oak Apartments. They found 3 boys, 15, 10, and 7 years old. They were abandoned and just living in deplorable conditions. Deputies say they looked malnourished and were injured. We're also just finding out the mother and her boyfriend, they have been found. They're being interviewed right now by homicide investigators. The 3 children taken to the hospital, and right now we still don't know how that little boy died.
It appears that they were basically fending for each other, which is very sad. Very disturbing sets of circumstances, so we definitely want some answers for these children.
And Sheriff Ed Gonzalez there told us that he has been to many crime scenes before, but really he hasn't seen anything quite like this. I've also spent the day talking to neighbors, a lot of families over here, and they have questions too. Many of them wondering how parents could have ever let this happen. Of course, that's going to be part of this investigation, and we'll keep you updated. Live in West Harris County, I'm Brooke Taylor, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Whoa, this is literally insane. Okay, so apparently the 15-year-old brother of, like, the dead boy who's 9 called the cops and said, my brother has been dead inside of our apartment for a year. Yo, dude.
Yeah, it's dark, man. I mean, it just the whole thing was so, and that was, I guess, that was the nature of the story. Was that here in the U.S., like obviously every local story has its own coverage, and kind of amount of attention it gets, for various reasons. I think this thing got attention just because it was so awful. It was
Ed
over the top, and then
Gonzalez,
every day that it kept getting worse.
Yeah, I bet. Like, okay, so this is literally one of the craziest things I've ever. No, obviously, I say this every week, so I'm not just gonna say that again, but I have like a little write up on this to flesh it out a little bit more. Because I still want to like look at this story for a few more moments here. So the skeletal remains of a 9-year-old boy, along with his 3 abandoned siblings, were discovered on October 25th in Houston, Texas. So literally, what, like last week almost, right? The siblings were described as being 15, 10, and 7 years of age. So the boy who called was the oldest of the bunch. Harris County Sheriff's deputies drove to an apartment in the 3500 block of Green Crest Drive, about 20 miles west of downtown Houston, to make a welfare check. The skeleton was out in plain sight in the apartment. What?
What is going on? I mean, and then just to interject for a second, like I don't know if you guys have the same laws in Lithuania. So here in the United States, there's supposed to be these laws where like people like teachers are supposed to, like, notice of course kids, they track whether kids don't go to school or not. So a lot of rules and laws around that. But then, like, if teachers notice that, like, a kid shows up with a black eye to school, like, ask him about that, like, what happened to you? And
Yeah,
if he's like,
exactly.
oh, I hit the doorknob, and then like he keeps hitting the doorknob, like, they should be asking and looking into the parents, which is what happens. I'll even tell you, like, when I was a teenager, I broke my hand in Boy Scouts doing something, and like the first thing they asked you if you're under 18 is like, hey, what happened? Because some amount of kids show up with injuries from monsters like this live-in domestic partner of the kid's mom.
Yeah, that's insane. That's seriously insane. Finishing off the story that I have here is that the 15-year-old, a male of the kids of the victims, had called the Harris County Sheriff's Office and told authorities his 9-year-old brother has been dead for about a year, and his body was inside the apartment. The office said in their statement. They said this. Deputies responded to the call and discovered the teen and his 2 other siblings living alone in the apartment. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez told reporters the other child's skeletal remains were also located. His quote is, "It appears that the remains had been there for an extended period of time, and I emphasize extended," end quote. The teen told deputies that his parents do not live there anymore in the apartment with him or his 2 younger siblings, and haven't lived there for several months prior. The surviving children had been living in a, quote, deplorable conditions, end quote, for, quote, quite a long time, end quote, Gonzalez said. Asked whether he meant weeks, the sheriff said the kids were on their own for a long period of time. Quote, "It seems they were in there while the body was deteriorating." Okay. Sheriff Gonzalez also stated that it appeared that the surviving children were fending for each other, with the oldest sibling caring for the younger 2. It was unclear whether any of the kids were attending school. The cause of death of the 9-year-old boy will be determined by medical examiner. The younger children appeared to be malnourished, and both had physical injuries, he said. All three siblings were taken to the hospital to be assessed and treated. The mother of the three children and her boyfriend have been found. Authorities said both are currently being questioned. Quote, we're going to do everything we can to make sure we conduct a thorough follow-up investigation, Sheriff Gonzalez said. Our hearts break for those three. All right, so this is like so morbid. I have a picture of the culprits, right? Apparently this is the couple. So apparently the mother is the one in the picture here, and then this is the boyfriend. The boyfriend seems like he's, I don't know, has like a face tattoo, also a golden grill it seems, and like some chains, and then some what seems to be like maybe gangster tattoos.
Looks like a moron. I mean, this guy's got warning labels all over his face.
Yes.
And in it. Yeah, I mean, what a horrible human being. And then these kids. Do these kids even exist according to the? I mean, not. I don't mean that like literally. I mean that like figuratively, or to the government. Like aren't you protecting these kids? Aren't these kids the responsibility of a whole lot of different
Yeah.
authorities? State, local and federal. So the whole thing it's just disgraceful. It's just so nuts because of just the even look, you mentioned they were in the apartment. Obviously doesn't seem like they were ever able to leave, really, and they were in the apartment when this body's rotting away into nothing. But it wasn't just them. It was a whole apartment full of people complaining about the smell. Nobody ever showed up. You know what I mean? Like, how is it the cops, the health department, the apartment manager? That's why I gotta wonder if this apartment is like a slum, or something that's like not even fully legal housing, or just, I mean, we're talking about people that maybe are just this close to being homeless.
Yeah.
So I wonder if these buildings are like semi-abandoned, or this. Sometimes you see this in some urban areas that have been around a long time or are a bit being renovated. It's kind of disturbing to to those of us not familiar with it. But yeah, I mean, there's some places that are like really the edge of civilized society, where you could be living in the middle of a big metropolis, but still be barely living better than somebody living in like the most remote village in, like, I don't know, Romania or something.
Yeah, but this is so crazy. Okay, I'm looking at these apartments, and I'm not from America, and we don't really have apartments such as these that are located in Houston, right? But these don't look like they're that
They don't look
horrible.
bad. Yeah, they don't look run down. I mean, you got to ask. The question is like, what's paying for those apartments? So, just case in point, sometimes you'll see a housing market overbuild, and then when the market, this is what happened here in California. When the market crashed, all these people that are overbuilt in kind of like less desirable areas of the county had built nice housing, and then all of a sudden they were turning to the federal government to put like basically people on welfare, on Section 8, assisted housing people into these brand new, like nice houses that they'd built in some place where nobody, it turns out, really wanted to live.
But this is so insane, man. I just keep thinking to myself, how did the whole, like, how did it all go down? So, okay, do we know how long the 9-year-old boy was dead for? Like, do we know how? Because apparently the news article, right, that I've read said like that the body was there with them for a year, but was it a year?
I think so. I think it was something like the, obviously they'd all been abused over a period of time. Hold on, I'm just gonna cough.
It's okay, dude.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, all good, all good.
Do that. I didn't want to clear my throat into the
Of
microphone.
course.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, the thing is that I know, like, I think that the other kids, what's disturbing is the other kids also had some substantial injuries. I think one of the other children actually had like a broken jaw. That was recent. That was from like the past couple weeks. So
Yo.
these people, they can't even, you know what I mean? They can't even neglect their kids, because at this point, you would just hope that these two monsters would just neglect the kids and forget about them, right? Because the kids would do better for sure without them in their lives. But oh no, they got to come back, and they got to
Right.
like, oh, some timer went off. They got to come back
Yeah.
and, beat the crap out of the kids and inflict more
Jeez.
and more injuries. It's just I don't without getting off on too much of a tangent. I always have to wonder with people like this, what is going like where do they think this is going to end with all that abuse? I mean, this I've seen this over the years, and like I said, it's really maddening. I'm not even gonna bring up some of them because they're just you go too much down the rabbit hole for today. But yeah, when I see these things where like there's always this pattern of like somebody who half the a lot of times isn't even really the kid's real father,
Yeah.
and they just start systematically punishing one or more of the kids in an escalating manner where the kid is just getting more and more violently threatened. Like it's only a matter of time before the kid is killed. And I
Yeah.
don't really understand what goes on with that. I don't understand why those people, why someone like this would even waste their time doing that. Like you think they must get some kind of pleasure out of it. It's really sad. I don't imagine either of them are going to fare well in the justice system after this. That's what I do think, though. I don't think anyone's going to be sympathetic to them
Right.
and their new living arrangements.
Right. I do see that the man's. I assume it's a man's. The boyfriends of the mother tattoo. When I said it was a gang tattoo, it's a tattoo with three letters F.O.E, and then below there are words in cursive, family over everything, and that's just like
Family.
that's so
Yeah, who's his
crazy.
fan? I'm like, can you imagine?
Yeah, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. Last thing I want to touch upon in this crazy, scary story is that apparently, well, you mentioned to me that apparently the neighbors were trying to sneak in food. So I'm just thinking to myself, couldn't the neighbors like call the cops? I mean, the whole apartment, which is not that bad of an apartment, like it doesn't look that run down, starts smelling like there's a decomposing body inside. How aren't like the neighbors who are must be aware of like who lives in that apartment, and that the parents aren't really showing up? Like seriously, did a 15-year-old boy had to save his own life by making that phone call? And once again, how did he call? Like do you think he had like a phone in there, like a phone that he could use to call the cops, or how did all went out? Do you have more intel?
You know what? If I did, I don't have it anymore. I think I was under the impression that he was able to leave the apartment at some point. Um, and maybe once you leave the apartment, there's all sorts of places you can go to
Yeah.
try to make a phone call. You don't need to borrow someone's cell phone to do it.
Mhm.
If you go to the store or something, I think the kid was maybe potentially going to the store to buy things um, with whatever money those two monsters left behind, and some sort of attempt to do parenting. But yeah, it was the whole thing was just strange. No, you're right. Like, why didn't anybody insist the cops come to help? I'll just say from my own experience, there's always this like spectrum of people who really do who are really eager to call the cops or the authorities and who will get on that and be responsible, and there's people on the other side who will go out of their way not to, and there's people in the middle who often think that someone else did it already, or think kind of are waiting for someone else to do it, so they think something should happen, but they're sort of complacent about actually making it happen, if that makes sense. So I think maybe that's what happened here. But yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, if I lived in an apartment and it smelled, I mean, a dead body is supposed to be one of the worst smells out of all of them, for a good reason, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we're kind of programmed that way. So yeah, I can't even imagine. That's what makes me suspect that maybe for as nice as this looks, it may be once you get inside, you may be seeing like a whole lot of like poverty and just dysfunction on a level that maybe doesn't trust authority and doesn't even really want to make waves because maybe not everything is kosher. I'll give you a good example.
Mhm.
Like if someone's there and they call the cops and somehow they get dragged into it, and it turns out that like maybe the people that are living with them doesn't match the rules for their federal or state, local, or federal assistance, they could actually get kicked out of the program. So
Oh,
sometimes it's like, you know what I mean? Like there's if someone who's like, I mean, this is not getting political. It's just saying, there's like a lot of single mothers who are on some kind of assistance who, um, they're not really supposed to have a guy living with them. It's kind of like a catch-22 because you would kind of want them to find stable relationships and maybe fathers for their children, if they don't have fathers in their lives. But then, um, A, this happens, like we're talking about, and B, sometimes the rules say that they can't actually, unless they're married, they can't actually have a guy in that house. If they do have the guy in the house, then why isn't he paying for the kids? Is how the government looks at it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like there's disincentives for people that are living on the far extremes of poverty sometimes to fully cooperate with the authorities, even in their own favor, because they're so worried they're going to lose what little they have, if that makes sense.
of course. No, that made perfect sense from the legal standpoint. All right, so moving past to another story. This was definitely crazy. We'll keep our tabs on to see like the cause of death because I believe we don't have the cause of death, but we could all imagine, I think, that these four kids went through hell for what seems to be probably most of their childhood. And now, moving to another story. Now, another story comes from the state of Tacoma. Well, not a state, right? A city. Tacoma in Washington, in the state of Washington. We had a Tacoma mass shooting. And I'm just trying to make sure I get this right. So, yeah, we have a mass shooting, and apparently it all happened on October 21st. Four people are dead. They have been gunned down, and an individual has been arrested for the mass shooting. We're reporting on that as it goes down. I also have a news story for everyone to listen in. So before we jump into this story, I want everyone to listen to the news coverage that we have. So let's just listen in right now.
Tonight at 6, the suspect in a mass shooting in Tacoma faces a judge for the first time. And a devastated family has so many questions and few answers. A Pierce County judge found probable cause to charge the 22-year-old man with 4 counts of first-degree murder.
Cairo 7's Kevin Coe was there, and he joins us live now. And Kevin, there's a lot to sort out here. Detectives tell you that they're still trying to figure out why this happened.
It's still unclear why any of this happened. Investigators say there's little to nothing connecting Malik Pate with the 4 people he's accused of killing.
I don't know why he did this, and I want to know why.
Marlene Williams is a step closer to getting the answers for her family, even if Monday wasn't exactly what she expected.
I don't think he deserves to go to Western State. I think he deserves to go to prison.
22-year-old Malik Pate was scheduled to be arraigned Monday. While a Pierce County judge did find probable cause to charge him with 4 counts of first-degree aggravated murder, Pate will first undergo a mental evaluation to see if he's competent to stand trial. Pate is accused of shooting and killing Maria Nunez, Raymond Williams, Natasha Brinsfield, and Emery Esse. Emery was Maria's son, Raymond was Maria's brother, and Natasha was his girlfriend. Raymond lived with Marlene at her home in Tacoma's Salishan neighborhood. Maria, who is Marlene's daughter, lived just a few blocks away with Emery. Pate also lived in the same neighborhood.
It surprised me. I mean, sometimes I wondered he was out there, but part of me didn't believe that he'd be out there. I thought he'd be long gone.
Court documents show Pate was identified on nearby surveillance. Detectives say they also found clothes in Pate's room that matched what was caught on camera, matching ammunition and the gun they believe is the murder weapon. The court documents also say detectives found shooting targets, showing that he had been practicing headshots. At least 3 victims were shot in the head. Pate's family, including his older brother, were also in court on Monday. He told us he didn't have much to say and would wait for his brother's evaluation. What investigators have not been able to determine is a motive. Detectives found no links to any gangs or drugs for any of the victims, and the only association any of the victims had with Pate was that one of them briefly went to elementary school with him.
And they all died for no reason, just from some guy just randomly just chose them. That hurts. It really hurts.
Now, Pate will be back in court on November 15th, where we will find out what exactly is discovered in that medical evaluation. Until then, he'll be held right here at the Pierce County Jail without bail. Live in Tacoma, Kevin Coe, Cairo 7 News.
So many questions to answer. We appreciate your coverage there, Kevin.
Yeah, so that was definitely insane, right? Really quickly, just to reiterate what we just listened to, and I'll just try to pause the audio real quickly. Here we go. This is insane. This is literally insane. So, Tacoma mass shooting, 4 people dead. Apparently, the shooter was practicing headshots in his home and apparently had no connection to the victims, just randomly went outside apparently in Tacoma and just shot the 4 people. Apparently 3 of the victims had been killed with bullets going inside of their heads, which would like you could word it as a headshot. So apparently this guy was practicing something and then he went out there and did it in real life, which is quite crazy actually. And I'm looking at the crime scene picture. This neighborhood looks like a sleepy, peaceful, nice neighborhood with like really nice scenery. You would not expect something like that to go down in such a place, right?
Yeah, it's always sad when that happens. I mean, what a coward. The guy thinks, I guess in his twisted mind, that he's doing something skillful, or I don't know what kind of strange motivation he took to thinking that was going to be the way he was going to spend his time honing his skills. But meanwhile, like, these aren't people that are shooting back at him, right? So what a pointless display of alleged skill by such a deviant personality.
Exactly. And just in general, could you imagine how the grandmother must feel? She just lost. Like, this is gonna alter her life forever, and she just lost all of these people in her life just because some crazy dude decided to go shooting. I mean, I don't know. Just from my standpoint, I wanted to ask you, is this like a regular occasion in the United States? Like, are these news? Because these are news that were curated by you this week. So I didn't really had the time to set up my Google alerts, which I will, and I do plan on setting up like a really technical scheme on my end where I wouldn't miss stories like this. But you've been living in America, your whole life, and is this like a regular once a month story, or is this something really like out of the ordinary?
It's kind of a politicized topic here because it kind of people, and like I said, once again, not dragging politics into the show, but people will sort of categorize things as mass shootings, sort of not always impartially, let's say. So like a school shooting, for understandable reasons, gets more attention and more public outcry than a drive-by shooting, even though drive-by shootings happen far more often. And certainly the number of victims that drive-by shootings hit, while they don't necessarily hit like the upper, if you were to like kind of lay out the numbers and say like number of victims at one time, while they don't always approach sort of the maximums we've seen from these horrible, really infamous terrorist acts really that we've seen over the past couple of decades. Yeah, it's like it gets tricky with how people look at it, and then it starts becoming this whole argument about whether it's gun control we need or more money into mental health, because someone who does this is almost always insane, or motivated by a terrorist ideology, but that's not the case here, presumably. So, yeah, that's interesting and how that works. So it's something I pay attention to. What I'd be curious is, and maybe some of our listeners and viewers will know, I'm kind of curious how much um, shootings like this happened in the old days, because there's always been like domestic scenes and things with, as long as there's been firearms, I'm sure there's been violent civil conflicts with them. But I always wonder, once we got to repeating firearms, how often things like this happen, because a lot of stuff happens that we sort of forget about as a society. Like, if you were to ask most people in the U.S., you would have most people in the U.S. don't even know that there was a whole string of like crazy anarchists doing terrorist acts in the beginning of the 20th century. So right around the turn of the century, right before World War One, and actually after World War One as well, right? I mean, this is the first, let's say, 30 to 40 years of the 20th century were a period of extreme political turmoil, and we kind of forget about it because almost everybody that was alive then is dead now. Or I guess everyone is dead, but like it really does rival what's going on now in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways surpasses it. And so from that same perspective, I always wonder, because we are living in an era of moral panics about things where people get fixated on an issue kind of out of proportion to the actual harm, right? Because there's way more people killed in the US, let's say, by automobile accidents easily, right, than like a school shooting or even drive-by shootings, let's say, right?
Oh yeah.
But
That's. Mhm.
yeah, but one gets a lot more attention, and then a lot of like hand wringing, and it turns into like this kind of, once again, this political thing back and forth between the parties, where it becomes almost like this football that gets tossed back and forth between them, but like the actual issue never gets solved, right? Like, we're not really any closer to stopping drive-by shootings or things like that, for whatever party has been legislating changes, let's say.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's gotten worse. I'll say right now, just to end that thought. Now we're at the point with 3D printing where you're seeing, what are they called? Ghost guns. So they're guns, before it was kind of hard to mill out a receiver, and actually make a gun. And now it's not hard at all. Like, it's just a blueprint that you can print out of a 3D printer. So you're seeing now untraceable guns that were never in the system. So that was the thing before that, when you had arms manufacturers, everybody's in like the I can't remember that the in the official system that we use to keep track of who's making guns. Well, now you have people that are never in that. They're just making guns for, let's say the underworld, all over the country.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a really good point. Jumping back to another story, right, that we wanted to talk about, because this one, I don't know, seems like it's already solved, but now I think the biggest story that we have prepared today to talk about, and it's basically a really happy story, because we wanted to get the really sad ones out immediately, and now we want to bring you something happy, but it's very crazy nonetheless. So we want to talk about the recent developments in the Cleo Smith case. So for everyone who's not aware about Cleo Smith, I just really want to quickly read what I see here on this case. So she was she still is. She's still alive. That's why it's so good for us to read about this case. She's a 4-year-old Australian girl, and she had disappeared on October 16th, so last month, you know what I mean? She disappeared from a campsite in Western Australia. Now, police allege that she was abducted by a 36-year-old man who was living in and around that local area. She was found alive and well on the 3rd of November after the suspect's home was raided by police, and her safe recovery after 18 days was described as extremely rare and also received widespread news coverage and social media reaction both across Australia and internationally. And I want to really quickly play a news clip for everyone to get reintroduced with the Cleo Smith case. Now, this case is massive in Australia, so I wouldn't be too surprised if like a good portion of our audience members already are aware of the Cleo Smith case. And yeah, it's a really good thing that you brought this up during the week, man, because this case is really crazy, and I think really soon people will understand what I meant by that. So I just want to find that clip that I had prepared to play for everyone. And right, so I'm just gonna play it right now. Everyone, just let's listen in for a little while.
We're still celebrating this morning, aren't we? It is our top story. 4-year-old Cleo Smith waking up with her loving family today. The outcome Carnarvon and the country had hoped for. 18 days after she disappeared from her family's tent came the incredible discovery. Cleo found by officers who never gave up hope.
Counts.
Cleo, my name's Cameron. How are you? Are you okay? We're going to take you to see your mummy and daddy, okay? Is that good?
Such a moment, wasn't it? Here's how it all unfolded. In the dead of the night, a miracle discovery. A team of WA police officers breaking their way into a locked house in Carnarvon. There was Cleo, alone and just 7 minutes away from her family home.
I just wanted to be absolutely sure that, you know, it certainly looked like Cleo. I wanted to be absolutely sure it was her, so I said, "What's your name?" And she didn't answer, and I said, "What's your name?" She didn't answer again, so I asked her a third time, and then she looked at me and she said, "My name's Cleo."
The breakthrough came after weeks of painstaking work from a team of more than 100 police officers. Cleo and her family arriving at the Blowholes campsite on October 15, and by 6 the next morning, she was gone, as we know. Yesterday, police arresting a 36-year-old man with no connections to Cleo's family. But from the community, relief that little Cleo had been found alive.
Relief, excitement, just so happy that the best possible outcome has occurred.
And that joy was felt right across the country and summed up by the Treasurer this morning.
Overwhelming joy. Like so many Australians, I did fear the worst, but to see her smile and to hear the news that she had been found just warmed the heart of every Australian.
But no one was more relieved than Cleo's family. Her mum writing on Facebook, "Cleo has seen her photo and she thought it was beautiful." Ali.
Sure was, wasn't it? Let's go live to our team of reporters in Carnarvon. And first to Nine's Mia Edgerton-Warburton, who's outside the house where Cleo was found. Mia, police have returned to the scene there. What's the latest where you are?
Well, Ali, they've been here all night, mainly just sort of guarding the scene. It is such an important part of their investigation right now. We know yesterday forensics really combed through and removed a lot of evidence, including a large carpet. That was all flown to Perth for further forensic testing and will obviously form a large part of that very, very important investigation. Now, that 36-year-old Carnarvon resident, that local man, he only became a suspect on Tuesday. Then police followed up very quickly. What happened next happened very, very, very rapidly. They got a search warrant. They entered this house at 1 a.m. in the morning, 4 officers, and that's when they found little Cleo Smith and got the outcome everybody was just so desperately hoping for. But our police commissioner says this is very much just the tip of the iceberg. There will be weeks and weeks of investigating and going through that evidence that still needs to come. But here on the ground in Carnarvon, everyone is just so relieved. There was just elation across the community to find Cleo healthy and safely back at her home. She seems to be in relatively good physical condition. We've seen celebrations across the town, balloons, people out and about celebrating, free cupcakes, everything. It's just been absolutely amazing here on the ground, Ali. A real sense of relief.
I think that celebration will last for a while. Thanks, Mia.
Let's go now to Nine's Joshua Dorr, who's outside Carnarvon Police Station. Josh, good morning again. Police still have a 36-year-old in custody. What's the latest on the investigation?
Good morning, Carl. Well, no charges have been laid yet, but we are expecting them this morning, that 36-year-old, back here in custody at Carnarvon Police Station after a short trip to the hospital yesterday. Now, as we've mentioned, obviously, evidence has been collected from the house. And the motive behind this man who was captured Cleo from the campsite back on October 16. Now, also important to this investigation, police will also speak with Cleo over the coming days. She was back surrounded by family last night at a relative's home, and we saw people coming to the house with gifts and drinks showing their support to the family, a very tight-knit community here in Carnarvon who know the family well. But Cleo will be spoken to over the next couple of days to get her insight into this investigation and exactly what happened in that house over the last 18 days. A very important part of it, a chance for police to celebrate last night, but that investigation ramps up into a new level from now. Carl?
Yeah, some of it's still very delicate. Josh, thank you.
And the iconic landmarks of Perth have been lit up in tribute to the wonderful police officers who worked tirelessly to bring home Cleo. Optus Stadium among the buildings to be cast in a blue glow, I should say. It was a fitting show of gratitude for the officers who spent 18 long days searching for the 4-year-old in the outback. Here with the rest of the day's news is Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, dude, your initial take on the Cleo Smith case. I will want to talk a little bit about the man responsible for her abduction, as well as bring some more like flesh out how it all happened for our audience members. But like your initial take on the Cleo Smith case, I'm sure you're feeling really good about it as well, because most of the time when a child disappears for 18 days, like, you're not really expecting them to be alive, right?
Yeah, and that is the case. So it is important to kind of split it into two groups, and I have my little stats here actually compliment of Dr. Grande, who just did a hot take on this story recently, so I was able to catch it and get kind of his more let's say educated outlook on it, given what his specialty is. So it was interesting. This is actually called a stereotypical kidnapping. Now, when I hear a stereotypical kidnapping, I think, well, like, that must be the one that's the most frequent, right? But no, it's not. It's kind of a weird term. What they mean is a kidnapping that like, it has certain criteria, but one of the main criteria is that the motive, I think, that the person is not like a parent or family member. That makes sense. So it's a kidnapping that's akin to more like a serious crime done by somebody you're not related to, which unfortunately often has very while like a parent may kidnap their child to kind of have sole custody over them, or to get them away from an abusive parent, or all these other reasons, both good and bad. For this kind of kidnapping, like, none of it's good. Yeah. None of it's for like the child's. It's almost entirely against the child's, best outcome, let's say.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. This was a complete stranger, right? And I definitely want to jump into who this guy was, but really quickly I want to flesh out how it all happened. So, at the time of the incident, the 4-year-old girl Cleo Smith was living with her mother and her stepfather, right? And they all decided to go camping in the Blowholes campsite in McLeod, which is around 40 kilometers north of Carnarvon. I tried to say it with like the Australian accent, because I have no idea how to say it in another accent, right? So essentially they went camping, right? And how it all went down was that so Cleo Smith, she has a older sister, if I'm not mistaken. I just really want to make sure that I get this correct for everyone. Yeah, because wait, give me a second here. like, because I've seen it, but now I don't really. Oh yes, and her sister, yes. So she had an older sister, from what I'm gathering, and in the interview, in the interview after Cleo's disappearance, right? Cleo's mother said that both girls had gone to bed in the campsite, in the family's tent around 8 p.m. in the evening, but they both woke up early the next morning at around 1:30 a.m. in the night asking for water, and they then returned back to sleeping after the parents gave them the water. Now, the family woke up at 6 a.m. in the next day, essentially the next morning on October 16th, and they initially discovered that both Cleo as well as her sleeping bag were missing from the family tents. Now, the tent that the family was sleeping in was opened to a length of 30 centimeters, or 1 foot from its fully open position, right? So it was slightly opened up. The family briefly searched the area for Cleo, but then they quickly realized that Cleo was nowhere to be found, and at 6:23 a.m., 23 minutes after they woke up, they called the police. Now, police arrived at the campsite at 7:10 a.m. They conducted an air, land, and sea search around the area for most of the day. The mother stated that Cleo had not left by herself, and she stated 3 days into Cleo's disappearance that she would never leave us. She would never leave the tent, end quote. So essentially, as the investigation was going down, I think the government also announced a hefty reward, 1 million Australian dollar reward, which is a lot of money, you know what I mean? Apparently, a lot of bounty hunters were in the vicinity, dude. This is the picture of the location where the campsite was located. I think it will be quite relevant for us. It's a desolate area next to the ocean, in Western Australia, right? Essentially, the discovery of Cleo happened on the 3rd of November. So, as I've said, 18 days after she disappeared. And Cleo was found by police, alive and well, inside of a locked Carnarvon house located minutes from the family home. So literally, okay, so the family was living 80 kilometers away from the campsite. The name of that city is that crazy name that I can't really pronounce, right? And now the dude who abducted Cleo was literally their neighbor, but then he abducted Cleo in like 80 kilometers from where they lived. So initially, I just want to give you this, propose a question. Do you think he was like scoping out the family movements beforehand?
Yeah, so that was what Dr. Grande had surmised, just given, where the crime happened and where this guy lived in relation to them. He lived pretty close to them. And given some of the other aspects about him, which I know you're about to dive into in a little more detail, it seemed like, and it was often the case for this kind of kidnapping. So here's the interesting thing: is this kind of kidnapping is actually this kind of stranger kidnapping. It's only like 1% of kidnappings, I think, in a lot of parts of the U.S. Now this is Australia. Dr. Grande, who I'm quoting, didn't have the research for Australia, but let's just presume it's apples to apples. So that was the part that I think made this so disturbing, was there wasn't really a motive other than, what it turned out to be, some crazy stalker person. And then from there, I guess that's the amazing part about the story, was that the motive was weird enough, I mean, fortunately, to not be kind of the usual reason why somebody would do this, which is for reasons I don't want to get too much into because it's pretty disturbing. But yeah, I think we can all kind of fill in the blanks, right? What I mean, what someone might kidnap a child for,
Yeah.
other than to hold them for ransom or something like that, which wasn't the case, right? There was no ransom note or anything. So yeah, this is like a fascinating story. I think just before we get into the suspect, I think this is a good point to kind of say why are we highlighting this so much? We're highlighting it because, well, it was a really happy story, but the second thing was that we have run into this topic so many times. So where a kid disappears and we have no idea what happened to that child. Um, I mean, some of our biggest episodes have been about that in terms of like discussion and time spent on it. It's like, Madeline McCann, right? So from that point of view, it's really interesting to get kind of an insight into like what it actually was. Like now we actually know, right? This doesn't mean that this is what happened on all these other cases, but this is like a piece of evidence on the side of, I guess, what this show is about, which is why do these things happen, and what are how do you prevent them, and how do we understand why what makes them
Yeah.
more likely or less likely to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, the man suspected of the crime was described as very quiet and an oddball by his neighbors. We'll get into it shortly, why they thought he was an oddball. He had not been in suspicion by the neighbors. He had fallen under police suspicion, however, the day before his arrest. Now, the discovery of Cleo was attributed by the police to a key clue of a car spotted driving from the campsite in the early hours of October 16th, the day when Cleo disappeared, with the police having made public plea for further information on that vehicle on October 25th, 9 days after Cleo disappeared. According to police, police work utilizing a large amount of information in the case was essential. So apparently they had a lot of information they had to go through. And, 19 days later, they broke into the house of Terrence Daryl Kelly. Okay, and this is the guy, man. This is the suspect, yo. This is, this might come as a big surprise for a lot of people who are watching this on our YouTube channel who are not aware of who the man is. You know what I mean? So essentially, Terrence Daryl Kelly, he kind of looks like Michael Jackson if he never did dancing. A little bit. You know what I mean?
Because of the Jerry curl. Yeah, he's got like the mid 80s like Jerry curl thing going on. I mean, he before I knew what he did, I mean, like what his hobby was, he looked a lot scarier than when I heard he was kind of quiet. Because I mean, he looks like the kind of dude that could be like kind of an angry meathead if you caught him the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is his home. It looks like a bit of a mess I reckon this is the backyard of the house. It looks a little bit of a mess. I do have a really nice article from the Daily Mail, from a UK essentially publication, right? And this is a video I want to play. This is, I believe, a Snapchat video, or maybe this is TikTok. I'm not really sure, dude. But look, this is the victim. This is the suspect. Damn.
It does look like Michael Jackson if he didn't work out and maybe was holding like some marbles in his cheeks.
Yeah, man, that's so crazy. And look, dude, we have some more pictures of how okay, so for everyone who's listening to this man has an obsession with the dolls, especially Bratz dolls. I'm definitely aware of this brand, but I've never really heard of a grown man having an obsession with Bratz dolls like that. And look, dude, this is how the inside of his home looked. And apparently, from what I'm gathering, these are not only Bratz dolls, there are like other types of dolls here, right?
So that was the interesting thing about this, I think, from the Dr. Grande perspective, was he was like, whoa, well, look at this. This is like, he called him, what did he call him? He called him a atypical perpetrator, meaning not atypical perpetrator, you know, the A without being typical.
Yes.
So, yeah, so it was interesting because it was like, oh, like, yeah, it's not kind of who we expected. It kind of seems like maybe the guy had some kind of weird delusion around owning like a living doll. I mean, by the way, that's I don't want to use the wrong word because there's like a trademark that I think is pretty close to that. But you know what I mean, like a doll that was alive.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. Yeah, which I kind of wonder now. I mean, by the way, the fact that they're identifying her, I mean, obviously they've made a lot of attention, so maybe they can't help but identify her. But I know, like, sometimes when they think the person, I'm trying to say this the right way, when they think the person has been offended against in a certain class of crimes, they'll like hide the identity of the victim again, especially with a minor. So it sounds like they're not really thinking that maybe certain kinds of crimes happen. I'd have to wonder, like, how did he? I don't know that this dude has it all together. How did he take care of like a 4-year-old for what, more than like almost 3 weeks?
Oh, sorry for that. That was just a news clip. Now, that's a really good question. You know why? Because, okay, so this guy is a complete freak, right? But then the surprising thing for me was that Cleo, she seemed to be smiley and happy, and she was abducted by this crazy individual for 18 days. Because this is the picture of Cleo, you know what I mean? Like the first, I think, picture released to the press when she was found. So she's happy. Apparently, she's talking well. I mean, dude, like, for a 4-year-old to get abducted by, you know, like, by like the guy who collects Bratz dolls, and I don't know, looks like he's, you know, not really from the same planet. Like, wouldn't that have long lasting effects on the child? Because to me, Cleo seems like, I don't know, from like the videos that I've seen, she doesn't seem all that disturbed. Now, obviously, that's just me saying. I don't really know what she's feeling inside. I've not really been around her, so I don't really know. But like, didn't you get the thought that, I mean, 18 days of being abducted, wouldn't you not necessarily be smiley all the time? You know what I mean?
I don't know how that dude got that kid away from her mommy for all those days and didn't just get driven nuts. I mean, I know when my kid was, let's say, around that. I mean, a bunch of years in a row, because my wife would do business trips a couple times a year, you know, before the lockdown stuff happened, and and some years I would have help here, like my mother-in-law or someone like that, but some years it was just me. And I remember it would be every night, like, where's mommy? Where's mommy? I want my mommy. And it would go like really long. Sometimes it was even like when we were at the same resort with her, but she had to be in like a work meeting. And so anyway, this is me saying, I don't know how this guy didn't have that kid saying that for 18 days. And driving him nuts.
Exactly. A new development in this case as well. This is the most recent picture of Kelly, right, of the suspect in this case, right? So the newest development is that the man suspected of abducting Cleo Smith had to be treated in a hospital after being beaten by another prisoner. Terry Kelly, who is 36, was filmed being taken away from Carnarvon police station in Western Australia on Wednesday in an ambulance with a band-aid over his head. He was arrested after police found little Cleo, who was 4, in an empty home in the coastal town, right? Um, the suspect was taken from police detention to a hospital late Wednesday because apparently within hours of his detention, he was badly injured. Like, he has a massive band-aid covering his forehead, so someone really put in that work, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't well received in general population. They'll probably have to put him in some kind of protective custody. And then I think he also had separately injured himself maybe after this. Um, like intentionally injured himself, maybe. I don't know either. There's a lot of reasons someone could do that, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy's not all there. You know what I mean? It's like such a strange, unrealistic crime that wasn't really well thought out.
But he does, I'm sorry,
yeah.
but he does have a car, he does have a house. You know what I mean? How is this even possible? Like, this is a crime scene picture. We can see a vehicle there. We can see that he does have a house, a bunch of dolls that probably cost money. Like, how does a person like that even make his money?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the person could have like some kind of autism spectrum disorder, where they have, like particularly valuable talents in one area, but then the rest of their kind of personality is not necessarily well adapted. I guess that's my thought. Or they could have had parents that left them some decent amount of money, and they're just kind of living off of that.
Yeah, that could be the case. Now, jumping back to the story, what do you think went on potentially inside of the house? Because I don't think we have those details yet. And also, what do you think would be the end goal for, the suspect here, in terms of having Cleo in his possession?
That's always the big worry, right? I think that was the number one worry with a case like this, because just rationally, the end goal often either doesn't make sense, like it hasn't been well thought out, and or sometimes the person, because of what they might do to a child once they've kidnapped them and got them away from everybody else, might be such that then they feel a big wave of remorse, and then they kind of try to make the problem the problem being the child, which is obviously the child's not the problem, but the child's their problem now, and has the potential to ruin their lives, like what's happening to this guy. So then they get rid of the child, and that's the big worry is, whatever happens. That actually even used to be why at one point in the U.S. they had capital punishment for kidnapping. They might still have it some places, but one of the things I realized was, well, you don't want to give somebody, like, you don't want to take away a person's incentive to return the child with the hope that they might return the child safely, with the hope that they might see some kind of leniency.
I see. Makes sense. All right. So, any final thoughts on this case? Like, what do you think what do you think the suspect is gonna get here? Like, what's like, it's life probably, right?
Yeah, or some kind of like mental commitment. I don't know the Australian legal system very well, but I'm assuming it's close to whatever we have here in the U.S. and whatever Britain has, etc. So yeah, I don't think it's going to turn out well for him. I doubt he'll ever be out and about in control of his own life again. If they do, for some reason, find some kind of loophole, maybe because the child wasn't permanently harmed. The one thing that I did want to jump on, and I'll just jump on the bandwagon in terms of kudos to the police department. It's interesting because they seem to have, like we're always kind of complaining when cops mess up in this show, which is funny because I'm generally pretty pro police, but then all these cases, it starts to wear you down when the police departments don't do a good job. Well, lo and behold, here we have a police department that, if anything, went like 100% the other way, where they would have did an outstanding job. I'll say, like, the amount of money that they threw at this thing. So, when someone hears like $1 million Australian dollars, it's like, well, what does that mean to me where I live? So I think it was something like 740, $750,000 American, U.S. dollars. So in euros, what is that? Probably roughly about
700.
700,000 euros. So it's a substantial amount of money even now. All these years later, when $1 million isn't $1 million. Well, $1 million is still way worth it to find some little kid that everybody wants to find anyway. So if
Yes.
you're a bounty hunter, it made a lot of sense. So you know what I mean? It was like it was like in Star Wars when they put these big bounties on these rebels and all these bounty hunters came flocking around to find them. Yeah, so it attracted a lot of attention. I think that was good because as soon as they did that, it was just a matter of time. Like we see this in the U.S. for way smaller rewards, whenever they open up the cash register to start actually just paying for information. Well, they got a lot of information, so that was their next problem, right? Here we have a lot of information, people trying to get rich. How do we like separate the real leads from the fake ones?
Yeah.
And apparently they were able to do that really effectively, and they got a really good outcome. I also think they got lucky, and it's not no one's lucky for getting kidnapped, but they're lucky that it wasn't somebody that would do something to the kid in the first 24 to 72 hours and then dispose of the poor kid like we've seen in some of the cases we've covered, or at least we've presumed in other cases.
Yeah.
So that also worked out. But yeah, it really was it was something I was excited to highlight here in the show because it is it's an almost unbelievably happy ending. Like
Yes.
you know what I mean? I can't even think how this could have gone better.
Well, maybe if they found the girl earlier, you know what I mean? Because like 18
Right.
days, you still have to ask questions. Is she still gonna be completely normal? Like, you know what I'm trying to say here, man.
Yeah. Whether the kid's got any kind of lasting trauma
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's. I mean, if there's any kind of silver lining for this guy, maybe he can throw himself on the mercy of just having been just seriously mentally ill, but not having had any intentions. I mean, the fact that she
Mhm.
remained alive this long really speaks in this. And I don't want to give him any favor, but at least it does speak to him potentially not being a killer.
Right, right. All right. So I think, without any further ado, we could move to the last case that we have. Well, it's not really a case. It's just, I think, a few comments made by the head of NASA, apparently. So, and maybe this is just something like more of an open discussion with us and our audience members. So, Bill Nelson, who apparently is this guy, he's, the head of NASA. Apparently, he made some interesting statements recently, right? Like October 24th, he now allegedly thinks that there's a high chance that aliens exist. So you know what I mean? It's like a bit of a jump to another topic here, but just in general, what do you thought about Bill Nelson's statements?
It was interesting because I think that the significance, at least, and it's funny because the article was actually from The Hill, which is like a political, like DC oriented publication. So essentially domestic United States federal politics and some international politics, but mostly stuff like a lot of wheeling and dealing around all the different government agencies that people get jobs at and make their money. So what was interesting was that we've seen a lot of back and forth in this topic over the past few years. I've covered it a little bit here on the show. I've been a little bit frustrated lately because there's still been a lot of like back and forth on the topic, and then like you have people that say things like I had one of my favorite columnists actually, who had covered this whole UFO topic in recent years so well, and for whatever reason, maybe for good reasons, he and his staff there at the magazine, at the Drive, had come to the conclusion that a good percentage of the UFO stuff that have been reported, and there's been a whole lot of it. I mean, I'll just the quick recap is there's a lot of let's see, camera, like visual recording, recordings and things like that. Also, there's radar. There's a lot of evidence that seemingly points to objects doing impossible things, not just doing it on radar where someone could say, oh, well, that's just radar messing up. But like, no, it happened in front of the camera, and it happened in front of like trained pilots. It happened in front of, like our military aviators who have already been kind of, the selection process is pretty severe to become an aviator. So presumably they're screening for a lot of the mental illness issues and other stuff. And of course, eyesight. Things that would make them more reliable witnesses. So once that started happening, the topic started tilting towards becoming something that people found more credible again. And then I think I got frustrated because the past 6 months, they started pushing it more towards, well, that's Russia and China doing drones, which I'm not saying it isn't, some of it, but some of it very clearly, I mean, if Russia and China had drones that did these things that are either being described, and some of which I think are in videos we haven't seen, and some of which are in videos we have seen. It didn't all make sense. So with that being said, I was really happy to see this article with this guy from NASA, the chief, is sort of tilting back the other way, where it's not people trying to tell us like we're not. I feel like we're not getting gaslit about it, like what was starting to happen again. On the topic, I just think you have enough people saying that there are things happening that don't make sense and seem to point to potentially other forms of life. I think that's always cryptic to me, because whenever they say the other forms of life thing, that doesn't necessarily mean aliens coming here from another planet. That could be a lot of different things. That could be, I don't know, interdimensional, where someone could be the same place in time and space, but just a different dimension, and flip over to our side. That could be, I don't know. There's a lot of speculation you can make. Is like whole shows about that, but without going that far, I think I was really happy to see that this guy started tipping the hand back the other way and saying that they were taking serious consideration that something else was going on, and it was kind of nice between them and the Navy really taking this a lot more seriously and saying, hey, those things you guys are embarrassed to talk about, like whether or not they're a defense threat. We do actually need to get them reported now, because it's becoming like a big public topic.
Yeah. No, that's interesting because, correct me if I'm mistaken, but just recently we had like that big resurgence in the UFO topic. Like, how there was like a period, I'm not sure how long it was, maybe it was like 6 months or something like that, where it seemed like everyone was once again talking about the UFOs. And I don't really recall if there was any one event that led towards that, or was this just something that became like a new fad or something like that. I remember us covering the Nimitz UFO incident. Was that the catalyst for this, or was the Nimitz from way back? I'm kind of confused by now.
Yeah, so it's for a good reason. So the Nimitz thing actually happened kind of way back. Like it happened a lot closer to like the Chicago UFO incident that we covered.
Oh yeah.
But the thing was, it had stayed essentially secret, and it's funny because it wasn't even necessarily marked top secret. It was just one of those things that for the aviators that did it, that participated in it, it was kind of embarrassing, and it was treated a little bit weird. Like it was some stuff was kind of, some of the materials were taken, let's say, to a safe place, but then the pilots were able to access other stuff, and it wasn't as hush hush as you would have thought. Something that, like, if it was something that was, there was a conspiracy to silence about it, which there has been, to some extent, and that's proven. The conspiracy wasn't in effect at this moment. So what happened was, years later, this New York Times article came out because people had gotten wind of this through like different forums over the years, and the story had gone back and forth, and kind of everybody was kind of amazed to hear that there was a real, like a genuine UFO case coming right out of like not just the Navy, but like one of the most famous modern carriers in the world, that happened to that group. And it actually happened on a ship that had some kind of semi well-known aviators now who do like podcasts and things like that. So there's a weird confluence of events. I think the people who were involved in that incident have done a good job of talking about it in public. But yeah, so what happened was something that was sort of an older story from like, I don't know, was it 2005, 2004? It was a long time ago. Started getting steam again about 10 years later. And then off of that, all these other things like the Chicago UFO incident, Chicago Airport, the O'Hare Airport UFO incident, which also had some pretty good amount of, let's say, eyewitness testimony and some other things from reliable people, once again, who should know what goes on in an airport because they're there all day. Those kind of things started coming out, and then I think you saw a lot more enthusiasm from the public because you saw mainstream publications looking at it. You saw a lot more awesome books come out on the topic that sort of revealed, oh no, like this isn't anything super new. Things like this have always happened, especially with military aviation and UFOs. And that's when you find out, well, it's hard to have a serious conversation about a topic that that if they won't let you take it seriously.
Yeah.
And then when you find out, oh, well, there's been some kind of active conspiracy there was I'll just, the long story short, as I mentioned in some of our other episodes, the CIA actually did have an official program right after there was a big Washington, D.C. UFO scare, which has been unexplained. There was like a bunch, people always say like, well, why don't the UFOs?
Which one was that?
So we didn't. I think I've mentioned it in passing before. This is something it's once again, it's like there's all this stuff that sort of happens in the past and we kind of forget about it sometimes because just there's too much to remember.
Dude, really quickly, is it from 52? 1952 Washington D.C. UFO incident. I can see something here. I never heard about this thing.
It might be that. I think. Well, here's the thing. There was a lot of UFO stuff going on. So post-war, and it seems eerily connected, maybe, to when we detonated nuclear weapon. That might have gotten. I think between that and all the aviation we were doing, if there was anyone watching us, that seemed to have really gotten their attention. Maybe that's some kind of like line in the sand where once a civilization becomes nuclear capable, they get taken a lot more seriously. That's just speculation. That's like the intergalactic zoo hypothesis I mentioned on our Fermi paradox show almost 2 years ago now. But yeah, it's interesting to think that like so what happened was so here's the thing. People are always like, well, if there's aliens, why don't they land why are they hiding and zipping around and stuff? Why don't they land on the
exactly
on the White House lawn? And it's like, well, it kind of sounds like they almost did. Like it's at one point, it wasn't just like one incident. It was like a whole bunch of like UFOs in these major like metropolitan areas back east and in the Midwest, including Washington D.C. And after that, what happened was there was so much kind of public panic that the CIA. This is not like a theory. This is real. You can look this up easily. The CIA actually waged a campaign leveraging the press to ridicule the topic because they were worried that if it wasn't, I don't know if they cared whether it was aliens or not. I think they assumed it wasn't, or they didn't really care because it didn't really seem to be affecting defense. Nothing seemed to be actually happening to us from them versus them worrying about the Soviet Union. They were worried the Soviet Union could use something like that during a war or in advance of a war to destabilize the American public. So from their perspective, anything that they couldn't explain and that had the potential to cause people to get upset, they were going to ridicule. So that's what they did. They turned it into like kind of what the topic is today, where if someone says they want to talk about, anything, UFOs, extraterrestrial topic, Fermi paradox, any of that stuff, everybody kind of collectively rolls their eyes because they've been trained to do so.
Whoa. Okay, dude. And I'm like trying to peek a little bit online to see if I can find anything on the White House UFO. Apparently, like I'm not really sure, but I found this picture right here. You could quickly glance at what I found here. I mean, this is from the History Channel, so I wouldn't necessarily. But it's from the old History Channel, you know, like
Oh
maybe
yeah, yeah.
it's before Storage Wars, I think. So maybe there's some higher credibility. But what do you make of this picture right here?
Yeah, I won't. I'll just. To me, that doesn't look like it's a photo from the era, just because of the colors and stuff. It looks the definition. It almost looks like a video caption. Yeah, I mean it's. There was definitely a bunch. There was a bunch of stuff that went on. There was a book that I'll have to bring it up next time, or maybe I'll put it in the comments.
Yeah.
That I read. That, I mean, obviously, like, one book doesn't prove anything, but the book was pretty well documented, and it talked about this entire topic. Uh, it was really fascinating. Like, when I listened to it, I mean, I knew some of this, but yeah, the history of the UFO topic has been a very frustrating one. With both a lot of misinformation, and there were even people that have seemed to have intentionally scuttled the topic after kind of leading people down a certain path, and you always wonder, like, well, were they paid to do so, or were they just doing so because they want
Yeah.
attention?
Yeah.
They're not nice people. Yeah, so
It's weird.
yeah, it's weird, but I think what this guy said wasn't weird. And this guy, here's somebody.
You're really quickly. You're referring to the head of NASA
The,
now.
the head of NASA. Yeah, the head of NASA is presumably not a weird guy. He is in a position of authority and respect. So for him to sign up to the topic and start, presumably being maybe more honest about it, or giving some kind of disclosure, I really appreciate it. So when I saw that, I mean, I think that's why also the place I saw it highlighted it, because it was
Yeah.
kind of some positive trajectory on the topic, until and not someone telling us we're not seeing what we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. Really quickly, for the last thing that I want to bring up, the last picture that I've showed from the History Channel. Now I have another picture as well, and apparently it's of some sort of, it's the same picture, but now it has a date attached to it. So it's July 12th, 1952. So this is the Washington, D.C. UFO incident from 1952. So apparently, I don't know if this was like visualized, but in 52, they did have color cameras, right?
They did, but I don't know how much.
This is enhanced.
Yeah, and I don't know how much people, like your average person, would you, plus especially at night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic I should know a little better, but I can say that, like, sometimes you'll see like old movies, where, like, they did color by that point, but they still did it in black and white, and sometimes that's like an artistic decision, but sometimes it's also because by that point, black and white photography was just way better
Mhm.
in a lot of cases than color photography. Like, the image quality is actually better.
Of
So,
course.
maybe I can't tell. I do wonder though that to me, this kind of smells like a recreation. That photo, for some reason, I don't know if it just looks like the UFOs themselves have been cloned in Photoshop, or what it is. Yeah,
No, man. This is probably some heavy
Yeah.
UFO guys will probably think, what are these guys showing? Yeah, this is probably not it. But anyways, man, I think, to close off this topic, UFOs, definitely something very intriguing for me as well. I'm gonna be paying close attention to see if there are new developments, new UFOs are happening. Since we're now starting out with this new format, we can definitely address these things, and this is why it's so amazing to me that now we can talk about these things that we really want to talk about sometimes, and we have the time. And I don't think we have prepared anything else for this week's show, so I wouldn't want to close everything off without, like, making sure that you don't have anything else you want to describe, or maybe just a few thoughts about, like, the format, or just anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, I'll just tack right on to what you said. Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, the feedback is going to be the most interesting, um, because like we said, I think at the top of the show, this doesn't mean we're not going to do the long format single case episodes, but we're giving ourselves more flexibility, just I think in some ways to flesh out what topics are the most ripe for that. So while we of course always get a lot of our best recommendations for that through the comments on YouTube specifically, I think this is a way of us kind of presenting a buffet of additional options that we're already kind of interested in, and then finding out whether the audience would like to find out more as more, gets unwrapped.
Exactly. That's a very nice way to put it, man. I really enjoyed this week's show. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed as well. We'll definitely bring you even a better show next week. This week was very hectic personally on my end. I didn't really have that much time to prepare, but Glenn definitely saved the day, so come
Well,
on.
you already do so much for the show. So the least I could do is try to come up. I don't know if people know, but some of the last few episodes, it's been kind of the opposite, where it's been like me scrambling to try to even get up to speed on the topic while you've, literally written pages of notes and gone through hours of content already. So, always happy to do my part.
Man, you definitely did this week. Like, it was amazing, and I really enjoyed this week's show. Guys, we'll catch you on the next week's episode. Really motivated, really happy moving forward with the show. Hoping everyone will enjoy the rest of their weeks, and please just stay safe. Catch us on the next week's episode, and peace out.